It's 4:50 on Times Radio. Just as we were speaking a little while ago, reports were coming in of an enormous explosion in Beirut. I can see the pictures on the news screens, the news channel monitors here in the Times Radio studio. Huge cloud of smoke. Not immediately clear what the cause of the explosion was, but Richard Spencer is the Times correspondent in Beirut, can join us now. Richard, hello. Can you tell us more?
Yeah, not a huge amount more. I was sitting at my desk about a quarter of an hour ago, and there was suddenly an enormous blast wave came through my flat and threw me right across the room. And when I came to, so to speak, I came downstairs and I came across a neighbour who was bleeding heavily. And I'm now out on the street, and the damage is enormous, and it's spread halfway across the city. I'm now getting on for half a mile from my flat. I've managed to get this far, and the damage is still extreme. Lots of walking wounded, people bleeding. I've just seen a man in a very bad way, just being fitted to a door shutter as a kind of a stretcher. It's hard to see where the epicenter is, but I can see a massive sort of pall of smoke rising over the port area at the moment. And I've also been told that there was an explosion in downtown, but I haven't been able to confirm that. All I can see is a massive pall of smoke over the port, which is about half a mile from where I am, and the blast waves seem to have spread all through this part of town and up the hillside where my flat is.
Richard, you were thrown across your room by the blast. I hope you're okay, and you're out there looking at what you can.
Yeah, I don't seem to have suffered any injuries, so I'm lucky.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. And from what you're saying, you can see serious damage a full half a mile away from where you were standing. So this is a powerful blast.
Yeah. And in fact, I've just bumped into a friend who's bleeding from the face in the street. As I say, my neighbour was bleeding, and I say we're at least half a mile, 3/4 of a mile from where I can see the smoke coming from.
Okay, we'll keep an eye on that story. No clue as to the source of that explosion. Seems to have been a quite enormous explosion in Beirut. Through our correspondent there, Richard Spencer, across the room that he was sitting in, and he's been telling us of damage to be seen, serious damage, half a mile in length and maybe more. On the news screens of the news channels in the Times Radio studio, I can see crowds milling in the streets of Beirut, upturned vehicles, scenes of, looked like very serious damage, and a huge cloud of smoke that Richard was describing for us just a moment ago. We'll keep tabs on all of that on Times Radio.
And how are people feeling this morning? Because we've been hearing on this programme today that the devastation that already existed within the economy of Lebanon and problems there, and then this happens on top of it. What are the emotions? Is it resignation? Is it anger? How are people feeling?
It's soul-crushing is the only way I can describe how people are feeling. Obviously, there's everything mixed in there. There's incandescent rage that a government, which already people here had been protesting about for months, saying is incompetent and corrupt, that a government going back, it looks like many years, successive governments, this was sitting, this stockpile in the port, and nothing was done about it. If this is the case, that this blew up because it was just sitting there, sheer incompetence, which has led to so many deaths and so much horror. And equally, as you say, are people who are already feeling incredibly defeated and devastated, people saying to me, this is it, this is the end, they've destroyed us, we are cursed, there's nothing more. I mean, truly, everyone's hearts are breaking, and everyone knows people who are missing, people who are incredibly badly wounded. Everyone is wounded. Everyone's homes have been destroyed, and people just wandering around, dazed, wondering what to do now.
And on that, how do people go about rebuilding their homes when a disaster of this scale has happened? How are you going to have a flat you can live in?
How do people? I mean, in the end, people will try and make do with what they have. I mean, insurance isn't going to cover all this. We know lots of glass was destroyed, and apart from anything else, we were talking about this. How do you even replace this level of glass within homes? And crime rates were going up. What if all homes are now open. The level of devastation here, every home in Beirut has some sort of damage to it. The entire downtown and the very famous Molana-Allen district, which is where all those bars that would be open all night, ripped apart, the street ripped apart, facades ripped off the buildings. Buildings that used to be there just aren't there anymore. The famous electricity building completely disappeared. That's the building that runs the electricity for the city. I mean, the level of devastation at the moment, many people I can see wandering around in buildings that aren't stable, but they've gone back to their homes because where else can they go? They were already desperate, already worried about being able to feed themselves through the winter. This is just a level of devastation and suffering that I can't see how people will be able to work back from this anytime.
What is the situation there now? What are people saying, and what's the latest with casualties?
Well, it's a total mess. It's hard to explain. This blast wave from this explosion yesterday just swept through the whole of the city. I have friends who were living sort of 4 or 5 miles away who have their windows blown out. I was about 3/4 of a mile away from the port where it happened. I was thrown across my room, as the piece says, and my flat is a total mess. All the windows, all the woodwork, all the doors blown in, the furniture smashed, and the effect on ordinary people was extraordinary. Everywhere you went throughout the east of the city, people were had blood pouring out of their faces because they'd been hit by flying glass. The death toll so far, I think, is officially up to 78. There's no doubt there'll be more as people are pulled out of the rubble. It seems to be in a warehouse at the port that was. This is the running theory, but obviously it's too early to be sure. But it appears that there was a consignment of ammonium nitrate, of several tons of ammonium nitrate, which is that kind of the fertilizer, but also for fertilizer bombs, had been impounded at the port a few years ago, and had just been left there while people worked out what to do with it, and somehow it caught fire and exploded. That's the main theory.
I'm just looking again at what you've written. No one here wants this to be an act of war or a terrorist outrage, but the official version of events, an industrial accident, seemed unconvincing to many. The port is controlled by Hezbollah, which Israel has hit before. My first thought was that they had hit again, although officials denied any involvement. How do you feel a few hours on from writing that? Have people changed their minds?
Well, yeah, it just seemed like a bomb. I had no doubt in my mind when I came out of my flat that there'd been a bomb somewhere. That's exactly what it felt like. And of course, it was ammonium nitrate. Then that is a bomb. That's used for a lot of bombs. Yes, the Israelis seem to be saying it wasn't them. We still don't know what triggered the original explosion. There seem to be 2 explosions. There was an explosion which caused a pall of smoke, and then this secondary explosion, which looked like I'm sure you've seen the videos, like nothing on earth, which was presumably this ammonium nitrate exploding. But yes, there's nothing at this stage to indicate that it was an act of war. It's just that everyone's so on edge at the moment that that's what everyone is thinking at the moment. It's a very sensitive week in Lebanon. The tribunal in The Hague, which is going to rule on who killed the former Prime Minister Rafi Hariri in 2005, is due to rule on Friday. And that comes in the middle of this enormous political and economic crisis, which everyone fears will set off some sort of sectarian conflict again. So people are really on edge.
Will there be anger, Richard, towards the government, irrespective of who set off the fire that led to this? That something like this was stored in the way it was stored in a port, because however you look at it, putting that amount of ammonium nitrate in one place was a huge, colossal risk that we've now seen the impact of.
Yeah, and we've seen that's happened before. Actually, there have been 1 or 2 previous cases where this sort of thing has happened. There'll be huge anger at the government, but I think it's more a resignation at the moment, a sense of resignation and despair about the depths to which this country has plunged in the last 6 months. As I say, there's this huge economic crisis here at the moment where everyone was saying, look, the government has to take action because there's a debt crisis brewing. The government was not meeting its debts. Everyone knew that the economy was on the brink, and they mishandled it absolutely terribly. They failed to take any sort of preventive action, and the banking system pretty much collapsed 3 or 4 months ago. The currencies collapsed. So there's been huge anger at the government anyway, and a huge despair that the sectarian divisions that have led to the government being created in a very sort of the way it has in Lebanon, with this sort of power sharing between the different sects, hasn't worked, and this sense that the sectarian leaders are clinging on to power as they oversee the collapse of the country. Ordinary people are in despair anyway.